I opened the door at 11 o'clock at night. The porch light spilled down in a warm yellow wash, and she was standing there, eyes red, both hands wrapped tight around a small leather bag pressed against her stomach. I knew right away, this was not the kind of crying that comes from sadness. This was the kind that comes after a decision has already been made. She looked at me, swallowed, and asked one simple question: "Can I stay here tonight?" I nodded. I stepped aside, because I did not know yet that she was not just running from her boyfriend. She was walking toward me, and she had been walking for a very long time. My name is Caleb Morrow. I am 39 years old, and I restore furniture for a living in Savannah, Georgia, mostly antiques, tables, dressers, church pews, the kind of things people inherit and do not know what to do with. I work out of a shop I built behind my house, a 2-story colonial revival on a quiet street lined with live oaks draped in Spanish moss. The house came to me in the divorce. Dana, my ex-wife, did not want it. She did not want the house, the street, or the version of me that came with both. We had no children. The marriage ended not with a fight, but with a long exhale, like air leaving a tire so slowly you do not notice until the rim is on the pavement. She wanted a different man, not a better one, just a different one. And I was not willing to become someone I did not recognize, so I let her go. That was 3 years ago. Since then, I built a life that ran on routine and silence, mornings in the shop, sanding oak until my fingertips went smooth, the smell of sawdust and linseed oil settling into my clothes like a second skin, afternoons restoring whatever piece a client had dropped off that week, a rocking chair with a cracked runner, a sideboard with water rings no one else wanted to deal with, evenings on the front porch with a glass of bourbon, listening to the insects hum their ancient songs in the Savannah heat, while the light faded through the Spanish moss and turned everything the color of honey. The bourbon was always the same brand, always 2 fingers, always with one ice cube that cracked and shifted as it melted. The taste was bitter and warm and familiar, and it asked nothing of me. I was not lonely. I was just living in the quiet part of my life, and I was fine with that. Or at least I thought I was fine. Elise Thornton moved into the house next door 8 months before that night. She was 36, an emergency room nurse at Memorial Health, and she came with a boyfriend, Kevin Ashford. Kevin was a commercial real estate broker, good-looking, confident, the kind of man who spoke slightly louder than the room required. He had a firm handshake and a way of nodding at you that made you feel like he was granting you permission to exist on his street. I noticed it the first time we met over the fence. He looked at my shop, looked at me and said, "So you do carpentry?" I said, "Restoration." He said, "Right," and walked inside. Elise was different. She watered her plants early every morning before the heat settled in, and she always said hello first. Not a wave, an actual hello, with my name in it. She smiled in a way that was quiet and deliberate, never staying long but always glancing back one more time before she went inside. I noticed that glance. I told myself I was imagining things. One afternoon I brought over a box of oranges from the small tree in my backyard. Kevin answered the door, took the box, and closed it without a word. No thank you, no nod. That evening my phone buzzed with a text from a number I did not recognize. It read, "Those were the sweetest oranges I've ever had. Thank you, Caleb." She used my name. Not neighbor, not hey, my name. I saved the message. I do not know why. I told myself it meant nothing. Some nights I could hear them through the wall. Not shouting. Kevin was not a shouter. His anger ran cold, the kind delivered in a low, steady voice that presses down like a hand on the back of your neck. I never heard what he said. I only heard the tone and the silence that came after. I did not intervene. It was not my business, but I started to notice a pattern. After every one of those nights, Elise would be outside earlier than usual the next morning, watering her plants in the gray light before dawn, moving slowly, like someone trying to remember what calm felt like. I did not name what I was feeling. I just knew that every morning I found myself standing on the porch a little earlier than the day before, coffee in hand, waiting before I had any reason to be there. Now let me tell you about the night she showed up at my door, because the hook I gave you was just the surface. After I opened that door and saw her standing in the porch light cream-colored wrap dress, dark hair loose around her shoulders, That leather bag clutched like a lifeline. I did not ask what happened. I did not say, "Are you okay?" or "What did he do?" I stepped back, walked to the kitchen and put the kettle on. I made chamomile tea. I set a mug in front of her at the kitchen table and sat down across from her. We did not speak for 10 minutes. She held the mug with both hands, and I could see the faintest tremor in her fingers. The tea steamed between us like a small, patient signal fire. Then she said it. Quiet, steady, like she had rehearsed it on the walkover. "Kevin and I are done." I told him I'm leaving. I nodded. I did not ask why. I did not ask what the final thing was. I got up, went to the hall closet, pulled out a clean blanket and a pillow, and set them on the couch in the living room. I said, "Take whatever you need." That was all, because sometimes a person does not need you to understand. They just need a place that does not demand an explanation. What I did not understand, what I would not understand for weeks, was that she did not come to my door because she had nowhere else to go. She had friends. She had family in Atlanta, a sister with a guest room and no questions. She came to me, and the reason she came to me is a thing I was too close to see. Kevin left first. He drove back to his mother's house in Jacksonville the next morning. Elise moved back into her own house but started coming to mine every evening. She would appear at the shop door around 7 or 8, sometimes in scrubs, sometimes in jeans, always carrying food she had cooked containers meant for 2. Penne with roasted red pepper, grilled chicken with herbs from her garden. Once, a full cast-iron pot of soup she carried across the yard with both hands. She would set the food on my workbench, pull up the stool in the corner, and sit watching me work. At first, she was quiet. Then she started asking questions, real ones, not the polite kind. She wanted to know the difference between white oak and red oak, why I used hide glue instead of modern adhesive, how I could tell when a piece was worth saving just by running my hand across it. One evening she ran her own hand across a mahogany dining table I was restoring water-stained and deeply scratched and said, "You can feel the years in it." I stopped sanding. Set the paper down. No one had ever said that to me before. Not Dana. Not a single client. She had spoken in 7 words the thing I had spent my career trying to explain to people who nodded politely and never understood. I looked at her, and she was looking at the table, not at me, and I thought, this woman understands something about patience that most people never learn. That leather bag, she carried it everywhere. She set it on the stool beside her every time she came to the shop. One evening it slipped off the stool and landed softly on the concrete floor. I picked it up and handed it back. It was light, almost empty. I wondered what could be inside something she held so close, yet weighed almost nothing. But I did not ask. The trust between us built itself through small repairs and small offerings, neither of us acknowledging the pattern or daring to give it a name. I fixed a dripping faucet in her kitchen one Saturday morning. It took me 20 minutes and a new rubber washer. She stood in the doorway watching the entire time, arms loosely crossed, leaning against the frame, and when I finished, she handed me a glass of sweet tea without a word, not a thank you, just a cold glass placed in my hand, the way you offer something to someone who belongs in your house. A week later I noticed my shop clothes smelled like lavender. Her lavender, she had taken them from the hook by the door and washed them without telling me. She folded them and set them back as though nothing had happened. I stood in the laundry room holding a flannel to my face, breathing in a scent that did not belong to my world, and felt something I had not felt in 3 years, the quiet, the undeniable evidence that someone was paying attention to the small details of my existence. One rainy night she knocked at 9, holding a glass dish covered in foil. "I made too much," she said, rain beating on her shoulders. "Lasagna. Slightly too salty." I never mentioned it, because she had made it for me, and that fact alone mattered more than seasoning. We both knew I made too much was a lie, and we both let it stand. She cooked more than she could eat. I repaired more than needed repairing. We both knew, and we both pretended we did not. One night we sat on my porch after dark. The rain had stopped and the air was thick and sweet with wet earth and magnolia. Her shoulder touched mine. She did not pull away. I did not either. I felt her warmth through the cotton of my shirt, and I knew I was in trouble, not the bad kind, but the kind you do not want to escape from, the kind that makes you hold very still, because any movement might shatter whatever fragile thing is being built between you in the warm, dark air. My pulse was loud in my own ears. The bourbon in my glass caught the porch light, and held it like amber, but I did nothing. She had just ended a relationship. I would not be the man who moves in when someone is still bruised. That was a line I refused to cross, no matter what I felt sitting beside her on that porch, no matter how much the silence between us was saying. Mrs. Pemberton, the elderly woman who lived on the other side of me, stopped me one morning while I was checking the mail. She looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "That girl doesn't look at you like a neighbor, Caleb." I laughed it off. I said something about Elise just being friendly, just being polite. Mrs. Pemberton shook her head slowly, the way only old Southern women can, and went back inside without another word. Elise started asking me for help with things she could easily have done herself. A light bulb in a high fixture, a noise in the house at night that turned out to be a branch against a window, a shelf she wanted moved. I did every one without question. Looking back, I understand. These were not requests for help. They were reasons she built, one at a time, to be near me, to share a room, to create 10 or 15 minutes of closeness that neither of us had to explain. But at the time I took each one at face value, because believing I was simply useful was easier than believing I was being chosen. "You smell like cedar," she said one afternoon, standing in the shop doorway while I was finishing a drawer front. Then she turned away quickly, as if she had said something she did not mean to say out loud. I stood there, sandpaper still in my hand, and I heard my own heartbeat in my throat. I did not fall in love with her in one moment. I fell in love with her across hundreds of small moments, each one too light to name on its own, but together heavy enough to change the shape of my life. She was in my house so often that when she was not there, the rooms felt wrong, not empty exactly, but off-key, like a song missing a note that no one else would notice but that I could not unhear. And still, I said nothing. And still, she came back, and my house felt empty when she was not in it. 6 weeks after the breakup, Kevin came back. He did not come for Elise. He came for his remaining belongings, or at least that was the excuse he gave himself and anyone who asked. What he really came for, I understood soon enough, was damage. He had still been monitoring the Ring doorbell camera at Elise's front door. She had not thought to change the login or the password, and he had seen her walking to my house every evening. He had timestamps, he had screenshots, and he came to my door with all of it loaded behind his eyes like rounds in a chamber, ready to fire the moment someone opened the door. He knocked on a Tuesday evening. I opened the door, the same frame where she had stood under the porch light weeks before, and there was Kevin. Polo shirt tucked into pressed chinos, jaw set tight, cologne I could smell from 3 feet away, the kind that announces a man before he speaks. "So you're the reason she left," he said, not a question. A verdict delivered on my own porch, under my own light. I leaned against the doorframe. I did not step outside, and I did not invite him in. I kept my hands at my sides and my voice level. I said, "She made her own choice, Kevin." He smiled, not with warmth, with something closer to contempt, the particular smile of a man who believes the conversation is beneath him but intends to have it anyway. "A furniture guy," he said, looking me over slowly, from the work boots to the sawdust still clinging to my collar. "She left me for a furniture guy." He shook his head, almost amused. I did not argue. I did not correct him or defend myself, because at that point, I genuinely did not know that she had left Kevin because of me. I thought I was just the neighbor she trusted. The idea that I was the reason, the actual, original reason, had not once entered my mind. He left that night without another word, but he did not leave Savannah. Over the following 2 weeks, Kevin visited every house on our street. He told his version carefully, calmly, the way a broker presents a property, except the property was my guilt. He told the neighbors that Elise had been involved with me while still living with him, that I had pursued her, played the quiet neighbor act until she was hooked. He turned the morning hellos into flirtation. He turned the oranges into a gift with intent. He transformed every small kindness, the lasagna, the evenings in the shop, the lavender on my shirts, into proof of an affair that had never happened. He was thorough, patient, and believable, because every detail he cited was real. He had simply stripped out the innocence until what remained looked like exactly what he wanted. Mrs. Pemberton told me what Kevin had been saying. Her face was careful, and guarded the expression of a woman who cared about me, but was no longer certain she knew the full story. And the worst part was that Kevin's version was close enough to the truth to be convincing. Every moment between Elise and me suddenly had a shadow version, and Kevin had made sure the neighborhood saw only the shadow. I felt dirty. Not guilty I had not touched her, not crossed a single line, but contaminated, as if his words had coated every beautiful thing in something I could not wash off. The tea became a seduction. The blanket became proof. The lavender on my shirts became a confession. Elise found out what Kevin was telling people. I saw the change in her immediately. It happened over the span of a single day, like watching weather roll across the marsh. She stopped coming to my house in the evenings. No more containers of food on my workbench. No more quiet hours sitting on the stool in the corner of my shop. No more evenings on the porch steps with cicadas and bourbon and the warmth of her shoulder against mine. She was protecting me. I understood that with perfect clarity. She was pulling away, creating distance, so the rumors would lose their oxygen. It was generous, it was selfless, and it was the loneliest thing anyone had ever done for me. The porch felt too wide without her on it. The dinner table held one plate again. The shop was silent in a way that no longer felt peaceful. It felt like subtraction, like a room where something essential had been quietly removed, and everything remaining could not fill the space it left behind. Kevin came to my house one more time. It was late, past 10, and the street was dark except for the porch lights. I heard the knock, and I knew before I opened the door. He was drunk this time, not staggering, but loose, his words landing a half-beat behind his thoughts. The smell of cheap whiskey came off him like heat rising from pavement. He stood on my porch under that same warm yellow light, and he said something that changed everything. "You know she planned this, right?" His voice was louder now, carrying into the quiet street. A light flickered on in Mrs. Pemberton's upstairs window. "She's been obsessed with you since before she moved in. I found notes on her phone about you, about your schedule, your habits, the times you sat on your porch. She didn't leave me because of me. She left because of you. And you didn't even know." I looked at him for a long moment, long enough to see the tremor in his hand and the red around his eyes, the particular misery of a man who has realized he lost something he never deserved, but wanted desperately to keep. Then I stepped back and closed the door. I turned the lock. I stood in the dark hallway and listened to his footsteps fade down the porch stairs, grow faint on the sidewalk, then disappear entirely into the night. And I stood there still for a long time after, because the silence that filled my house after that door closed was heavier and more complete than anything Kevin had ever said. "She planned this." Those 3 words replayed in my head like a skipping record, catching the same groove over and over. I sat at my kitchen table in the dark and began reviewing everything with new eyes. Every morning she said hello first. Every small request for help, the light bulb, the shelf, the noise in the attic, the text about the oranges, "Thank you, Caleb." The lasagna nobody accidentally makes too much of, the shop clothes washed in lavender and folded without a word. "You smell like cedar." The shoulder that pressed against mine on the porch and did not pull away. If what Kevin said was true, then everything I had filed under coincidence was not coincidence at all. Everything I believed was spontaneous had been architecture, careful, patient, deliberate. Every moment that felt accidental was designed, and I did not know whether I should feel betrayed, or honored, or frightened, or something else. Entirely, something that did not have a name in any language I spoke. I was not angry at her. I was stunned, and surprise, sometimes, cuts deeper than betrayal, because at least betrayal confirms what you suspected. Surprise rearranges the entire map. Kevin was not dangerous because he lied. Kevin was dangerous because he told the truth, and told it at the exact moment it would cause the most damage. The silence between Elise and me lasted 3 days. She did not come over. I did not knock on her door. I went back to the shop and turned on the sander, and I worked on the same tabletop for 3 straight days without making any real progress. The wood did not need more sanding. I was the one who could not move forward. On the 4th morning, I walked across the yard and knocked on her front door. It was the first time I had ever gone to her. Every previous visit, every shared meal, every evening in the shop, she had always been the one to make the crossing. Now it was my turn, and the 30 feet of grass between our front doors felt like the longest distance I had ever walked. My hand was shaking when I knocked. and I could not tell if it was anger or something else entirely. She opened the door. Her eyes were swollen, her hair pulled back. She did not look surprised. She looked like someone who had been waiting not with hope exactly, but with the quiet patience of a person who has already accepted every possible outcome, including the worst one. I stood on her porch, hands at my sides, and said, "Kevin told me something. I need to hear it from you." She did not deny it. She did not look away or reach for a deflection. She stepped back, let me in, and sat down at her kitchen table, the same posture I had offered her weeks ago, across my own table, with tea and silence. But this time there was no tea, just the two of us and the full weight of the truth sitting between us, waiting to be picked up. She told me everything. Before she moved to this street, before Kevin was even looking at houses in Savannah, she had seen me. It was at the Saturday farmers market on Forsyth Park. I was picking oranges from a vendor's table, talking to the woman who sold them, an older woman with sun-dark hands and a wide straw hat. Elise told me she stood 6 feet away and listened to the way I spoke, patient, unhurried, genuinely interested in what this stranger had to say about her crop that season. She said it was the first time in years she had heard a man speak to someone with absolutely no agenda. She asked the vendor afterward who I was. The woman said, "That's Caleb. He buys my oranges every Saturday. Sweetest man you'll meet in this city." When Kevin found the house next to mine listed for sale 3 months later, Elise told him she loved the neighborhood, the trees, the proximity to her hospital. All of those things were true, but the reason, the real and only reason, was 30 feet away, sanding oak in a backyard shop, completely unaware that he had already been chosen. She looked at me across her kitchen table and said, "I didn't move next to you to steal you. I moved next to you because you were the first person in years who made me feel like kindness still existed, and I needed to be near that. Even if nothing ever happened between us." Then she opened the leather bag, the one she carried everywhere, the one that had fallen in my shop, the one that weighed almost nothing. She reached inside and pulled out a single object, a dried orange, pressed flat, sealed carefully in a small Ziploc bag. It was from the box I had brought to her door 8 months earlier, the box Kevin had taken without a word of thanks. She had saved one, dried it, pressed it flat between paper towels, and carried it with her every single day since. I looked at that orange in her hands. It was brown and thin as old paper, the faintest trace of citrus still rising from it like a memory that refuses to fully fade. And I understood. This was not obsession. This was not a woman who had lost perspective. This was reverence, the careful, deliberate kind of holding on that I had never experienced from anyone, not even in my marriage. She had been carrying proof of my goodness for 8 months, while I did not even know I was good. She did not confess love. She confessed faith, that she had believed I was a good man before I had the chance to prove it, and she had carried that belief with her like something sacred and fragile and entirely irreplaceable, tucked inside a leather bag alongside a dried orange. I did not say "I love you too." I said, "I need time. Not because I don't feel the same, but because I want to be sure I'm choosing you for the right reasons. Not just because you chose me first." She nodded. There was no pain in her expression, no disappointment, just a steadiness, like someone who has already decided to wait as long as necessary, because the waiting itself is a kind of devotion. I walked to her front door. I put my hand on the knob, then turned back. "The oranges weren't that sweet, Elise," I said. "You just wanted them to be." She laughed, the first real laugh I had heard from her in weeks, bright and sudden and startled out of her, and she said, "They were sweet enough." I carried that dried orange in my mind the whole walk home, and I understood. Someone had held evidence of my kindness for 8 months, and I had not even known I was kind. I still do not know if that is the saddest thing or the most beautiful thing I have ever learned about myself. I think it might be both. 2 weeks later, I knocked on her door with a fresh basket of oranges in my hands. I did not say anything. I did not have to. She looked at the oranges, then looked at me, and I watched understanding move across her face like light crossing a room. That evening she came over, no food in her hands, no excuse on her lips, no invented reason. She just walked into the shop, sat down on the stool in the corner, and watched me work in silence. After a while I slid a small piece of white oak across the bench toward her and handed her a folded sheet of fine grit sandpaper. "Sand with the grain," I said. "Never against." She took the paper and began slowly, carefully, following the lines of the wood the way you follow the current of a river, when you are not trying to get anywhere, just trying to stay in the water. I watched her hands move across the surface, steady now, no tremor, no hesitation, and that was the evening I knew I did not need more time. Not another day, not another hour. The certainty had been there for weeks. I had simply been too afraid to stop arguing with it. 3 months later, she was still living in the house next door technically, but her toothbrush was in my bathroom. Her coffee mug, the blue one with the chipped handle she refused to replace, sat beside mine on the counter every morning. Her running shoes were lined up next to my boots at the back door. A jar of her lavender hand cream lived on the kitchen windowsill where it caught the early light. We never had the conversation. We never sat down and said, "This is official now," or "So what are we?" We just let the evidence accumulate, day by day, object by object, until the verdict was obvious to everyone, including us. We simply stopped pretending there was a line between her house and mine, and started using the word home, as if it meant one place. I remember those mornings best. She worked the night shift at Memorial, 12 hours on her feet in the emergency room, and she would come home at 6 in the morning, exhausted, her scrubs smelling of antiseptic and effort. She would slide into bed beside me, and I would feel the mattress dip, and then her cold hands pressing flat against my back, right between my shoulder blades. I never turned around. I just reached behind me and pulled the blanket up over her shoulders, and she would burrow into the warmth I had been building through the night. That was how we said it, not with words, but with cold hands and warm blankets and the quiet, steady sound of someone breathing next to you who has chosen, again, to be there. Some mornings I would lie still for a long time afterward, feeling her breath slow and deepen against my back, and I would think, this is what it sounds like when someone trusts you completely. Kevin sold the house next door and left Savannah for good. Before he went, he sent Elise one final message: "I hope he's worth it." She did not reply. I know because she showed me the text, holding her phone up the way you hold a receipt you are about to throw away. I did not comment. There was nothing left to say. Kevin had already answered his own question by leaving. 1 year later, I finished restoring a walnut dining table from the Victorian era. It had taken me 14 months, the most ambitious project of my career. The veneer had been water damaged, the joinery was failing, and 2 legs had been repaired with modern screws that had split the original mortises. I rebuilt it joint by joint, layer by layer, from the inside out. The day I applied the final coat of oil and stepped back to look at it whole, I did not call the client who had commissioned it. I moved the table into my own dining room. Elise came in from the kitchen, saw it placed where our old table had been, and said, "You're keeping it?" I said, "It took me 14 months to restore. Some things you don't sell, you build your life around them." She did not reply with words. She walked over and placed her hand flat on the surface of the wood, exactly the way she had touched that first table in my shop, months before, when she said, "You can feel the years in it." The gesture was the same, but now the years she was feeling included ours. The house next door has new owners now. A young couple. They wave from their driveway but keep to themselves, which suits us fine. Elise lives with me, officially, completely, her name beside mine on the mailbox. Her side of the closet takes up 2/3 of the bedroom space. Her shift schedule is pinned to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a peach. Her scrubs hang on the laundry line beside my shop aprons, and on windy days they twist together like 2 people slow dancing to music only the wind can hear. The small leather bag hangs on a hook behind the front door, right next to my canvas workshop jacket. Inside it, still sealed in its small Ziploc bag, is the dried orange. She has never removed it, never thrown it away. I asked her once, on a quiet Sunday morning while we were making breakfast together, "Why do you still keep it?" She set down the spatula, looked at me, and said, "Because it's proof that I was right about you before you were right about yourself. Mrs. Pemberton caught me in the yard last week." She walked over slowly, the way she does everything now, and looked at me with that same knowing expression, except now it was softened by satisfaction, the face of a woman who had been right all along and had the grace not to crow about it. "I told you, Caleb," she said. "That girl didn't look at you like a neighbor." I smiled. This time, I did not laugh it off. Our love never had a single explosive moment. It was more like the way wood absorbs oil, slow, fiber by fiber, until one day you step back and notice the entire grain has come alive with a warmth that was always there, just waiting to be brought out. She never said "I love you" first. She said it with cold hands at 6 in the morning, with oranges always full in the kitchen basket, with the way she sanded beside me in the shop even though she never liked the dust. And I said it back by keeping the table, by pulling the blanket over her shoulders, by being there every time she walked through the door. Sometimes I think about that night. The knock at 11 o'clock. The warm yellow porch light spilling down, her standing there in that cream-colored dress, with the leather bag pressed tight against her body, like a secret she had been carrying for 8 months. I understand now what I could not have seen then. She was not looking for shelter. She was not running away from something. She had chosen me long before that evening, chosen me on a quiet Saturday morning at a farmer's market, watching a stranger pick oranges from a wooden crate and speak gently to a woman he owed absolutely nothing to. And I had no idea I was being chosen. That is the thing about love, is it not? Sometimes it does not arrive with a declaration or a grand gesture or a speech rehearsed in front of a mirror. It arrives with a knock on the door at 11 at night, a container of lasagna someone claims they cooked too much of, a dried orange kept for 8 months inside a small leather bag that never left her side. And if you are lucky, if you are truly, deeply, quietly lucky, you recognize it before it is too late. She carried proof of my kindness before I knew I was kind, and every morning I wake up beside her, I try to deserve the version of me she saw first. Have you ever discovered that someone had quietly been choosing you long before you had a chance to choose them back? And if she had not knocked on my door that night, do you think I would have ever known? If this story touched something in you, hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and write me something in the comments below. I read every single one, and I would love to hear your story.